Friends. Today's lecture is short and sweet. We're going to intro economic development, which is, oddly enough, in many disciplines, the single most important indicator of a country or state. But for us, it's just one way to talk about states. So we're going to be talking about levels of development. Are they more developed, less developed, etc., in terms of not just money, but other things as well. So you're going to want to start a new set of notes. I'll hit the present on this thing. New page notes and call it Economic Development 101. And basically it's what's this world compared to this world. So basically, there are different levels of development, and that's just kind of the first thing you need to know, is that every country is on a different continuum of development, meaning we're all kind of headed to we're not all headed to the exact same thing. Basically, we're in the process of improving our material conditions, but sometimes those material conditions are different. So you take a look at here. This is research and development. For science and engineering, boy, that's one continuum we could look at. We could also look at education. We could also look at all these different things. So, generally more developed countries are going to be more developed in all things, but that's not always true. So anyway. So what we need to know is the language that I just used is an MDC. It's kind of hard in the MDC for Snoop D-O-double-G. But in the MDC, it's a more developed country, and you can kind of do it by gut, but be very careful. They're sometimes called first world countries, so that goes back to an old war designation for allies of the Allied forces and allies of the Axis forces, and then there's third world countries that were just like not involved. So there are countries that have higher standards of living. They are in a lot of ways. Not just money, but also we'll get into the measures here at the end. So you need to know MDCs, more developed countries. The next thing you need to know is LDCs. These are less developed countries, and these places they're called third world, but we're not going to use that terminology. It's not necessarily bad. It's just inaccurate, and it does come with some sort of undercurrents of ethnocentrism. So we're just going to try not to use third world countries, though you're not bad if you do. We're going to go with less developing countries, or even developing countries. I'll sometimes get those mixed up. And they're countries with lower standards of living compared to the index we're going to look at in a second. And they're wide ranging. It could be anywhere from like people are literally starving to death in the streets to just people have to work crazy hard or kids don't get an education, something like that. They can be high developing, meaning they're on the route to being a higher developed country and just not there. They can be medium developing, meaning they're increasing at a good rate. And then they could be low developing, which essentially means they're not really making any changes. And finally, heck, what I can actually already hear Joey in the back like, well, how do you measure it? And the answer is the Human Development Index. It helps measure the levels of development around the world, and it considers a number of things. The first is standard of living, which is wealth versus income, and material possessions. Do you have a lot of stuff? Do you have a little stuff? Do you have a lot of expendable income, or does it all go to necessities or material things? Or I'm sorry, necessary things. Health and life expectancy. You could be as rich as you want, but if everyone pops out and just dies after 2 years, you're not necessarily a more developed country. So health and life expectancy, access to knowledge, education. There are a number of things. We will be talking about one of the most important factors that is not on the list, which is women's rights. And it turns out that women's rights, when those things are changed, all of the things in the Human Development Index increase. So you might wonder, heck, why we don't do that more often. But on the next page is kind of a way of looking at the world, and you're not going to be surprised by what you see. Higher developed countries are westernized countries, people who have historical access to resources or have taken resources from other countries. And those lower developed countries are going to be those countries where those resources have been exploited and or taken. You can take a look at India, which is booming still and blowing up in so many ways, and they still feel the effect of imperialization on their culture. It's really it kind of sad but impressive, the way that you can turn a country green by turning another country red. So that's all you need to know for tonight. You need to know those three things. And there will be kind of a quiz tomorrow, so be ready. Maybe everybody raise your hands like a heck of a lot tomorrow. I'm being observed by Miss Parker, and so make me sound good. Don't make me sound bad. I guess if you need to make me sound bad, go ahead and do it. But you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. Have a good night, guys. I hope everything goes well. CRQ's on Thursday.